On Tables, Voltaire, and the Fifth Spiritual Empire. A commentary on a 1975 aphorism by the Purple Sage. Author. Redacted or attributed as needed. Submitted to Journal of Esoteric Historiography and Comparative Symbolic Systems. Date. Fictitiously backdated or present day. Abstract. This paper analyzes a now notorious 1975 quote by the occultist known as the Purple Sage. The aphorism, often mistaken for a product of its time, was in fact deliberately authored decades later by the sage himself, employing a strategy of temporal seeding, the projection of magical utterance into a fictional historical frame to alter interpretive reception. Drawing on an emerging metaphysical schema of 5 spiritual empires, each aligned with a classical element and symbolic organism, the present study argues that the quote constitutes not merely an opinion on civilizational preference but a ritual utterance, structurally self-referential and cosmologically dense. Introduction. Who was the Purple Sage? In esoteric circles, the Purple Sage is both more and less than a historical figure. While occasionally cited as an occultist active in the mid-1970s, the identity is now known to be retrocausally constructed, a magical persona developed in the 2020s by a living practitioner. The 1975 quote, attributed to him, is thus a kind of magical forgery, but, crucially, one intended as a philosophical thought experiment rather than a hoax. The quote in question reads, "NGT, if I were to argue why a weirdo like me should rather live in the Western world rather than any of the other 3 spiritual empires of this planet, which are India, China, and the Middle East, I would say that this is the realm where I may love both open and arguably prominent tables of correspondences, and, at the same time, Voltaire." I believe Aleister Crowley was saying something rather similar, a while back. The quote invites us into a comparative metaphysical geopolitics. But its real potency lies not in its argument, but in the way it performs its own logic. It is a ritual mirror, a symmetrical utterance in which content and form reflect the same dialectic, system and satire, order and irony, priest and jester. 2. The Spiritual Empire's Framework. The Sage's framework identifies 5 spiritual empires, each associated with a classical element, a symbolic organism, and a dominant mode of sacred intelligence. For formatting compatibility across print, screen, and plaintext contexts, this paper adopts the occult equals convention in place of tables. The Middle East occult equals fire occult equals camel occult equals revelatory law, prophetic intensity, vertical command structures. India occult equals air occult equals elephant occult equals philosophical vastness, mythic play, expansive mind ritual. China occult equals earth occult equals bamboo occult equals harmonized structure, cosmic governance, natural systems. The West occult equals water occult equals corn occult equals reflexive irony, hybridized thought, self-undermining system building. Japan, Shinto occult equals spirit, quintessence occult equals slime mold, Physarum polycephalum. Occult equals network optimization, non-hierarchical awareness. Kami is behavioral logic. Each of these empires represents not merely geography or culture but spiritual climate zones, enduring structures of relationship between the sacred, the knowable, and the comic. Notably, the schema also observes an ontological polarity. Yang empires are represented by animals, while yin empires are represented by plant or plant-adjacent organisms. The 5th element, quintessence, is embodied not by an easily typologized being, but by a slime mold, liminal, adaptive, and radically intelligent in a non-conscious way. 3. Tables and Voltaire. The Magus as amphibian. The core tension of the sage's quote is found in the line, "NGT, this is the realm where I may love both open and arguably prominent tables of correspondences, and, at the same time, Voltaire." This is not just a cultural preference, it is a metaphysical profile. It celebrates a civilization uniquely capable of honoring both sacred taxonomy and heretical wit. The first half, Tables of Correspondences, refers to the priestly tradition of systematizing occult knowledge. The Western esoteric tradition is especially rich in this regard. From the Sefer Yetzirah to Agrippa's 3 books to the Hermetic Kabbalah, it thrives on sympathetic indexing. The second half, Voltaire, invokes the jester, the skeptic, the destroyer of dogmas. That the sage places these two figures side by side is no accident. It is the coexistence of the magus and the satirist that defines the West. The West is the only empire where these two archetypes may cohabitate in the same psyche. In symbolic logic. NGT, priest occult equals fire, yang jester occult equals water, yin. Thus the Western magician becomes an amphibian, 1 foot in sacred geometry, 1 foot in comic deflation. Crowley is cited as precedent, not just for content, but for tone. He wrote in paradox, loved footnotes, and made sanctity indistinguishable from sleaze. This is not hypocrisy, it is alchemy. IV. Omission as fifth element, the case of Japan. Although not named in the original quote, a fifth spiritual empire has been proposed by the sage himself. Japan, Shinto occult equals quintessence, spirit occult equals slime mold. That the quote from 1975 forgets. Japan is itself an esoteric gesture. Quintessence is what binds but remains unspoken. Its omission is not oversight but a veil. The slime mold, Physarum polycephalum, is a masterstroke. In contemporary research, it has replicated the Tokyo rail system via decentralized optimization. It is neither plant nor animal, neither purely receptive nor active. It thinks, but without a brain. This is Shinto by behavior. Kami is network, shrine is pathfinding algorithm. Japan's subway system, so often cited as a monument to functional strangeness, becomes the very expression of spirit. Here, infrastructure becomes ritual. V. The biblical footnote on demons and jurisdiction. In a further aside, the sage entertains a perennial idea in Western ceremonialism, that the Bible, far from condemning magic outright, secretly grants the magician the right, but not the obligation, to command spirits. This theory originates in the Solomonic current, especially the Lemegeton, where the magician's authority is derived from divine names rather than personal holiness. The magician becomes not a saint, but a lawyer, one who knows the secret clauses of a metaphysical contract. NGT, thou shalt not suffer a witch to live. But what if the witch has read the fine print? V. The ritual structure of the quote. We now return to the quote with its full machinery revealed. Structurally, it mirrors the cosmology it invokes. It begins with the jester. A weirdo like me, water, yin. Moves into the priest. Should rather live in the Western world, fire, yang. And ends in magical fusion. Where I may love both tables of correspondences and Voltaire. This is more than argument. It is structure acting on content. The sentence becomes a portable mandala. A slime mold, but linguistic. 7. Conclusion. Am I the sage? The author of this paper is, by confession, the original author of the quote. The backdating was a magical act, not deception, but transformation. A personal meditation on whether one's own consciousness would have better flourished in another era. An attempt to send a psychic fragment of self into an alternate timeline, to see if it could take root. That it was taken seriously is proof it worked. That it still deserves commentary is proof it matters. Appendix. On occult equals notation. This paper has used the phrase occult equals in place of tables to express symbolic relationships. This choice was made both to honor plaintext formatting constraints and to model fluid rather than rigid correspondences. As slime mold does not draw its paths in columns, so too this paper prefers trails over grids. References. References omitted here but can be added on request. Crowley, Agrippa, Sefer Yetzirah, Zhuangzi, Voltaire, etc.